The story begins with a boy named Angus. His mum had sent him out to go swimming in the ocean, but instead he decided to quietly sit by the shore and kill some time. Suddenly, he noticed a large egg submerged in the water. He pulled the egg out and started staring at it closely when his mum suddenly walked over and told him it was time to head back home. Angus quickly hid the egg inside his bucket and left with his mum, Annie. Annie was upset with him because Angus hadn't even tried getting into the water, let alone swimming. He was still completely dry. She kept getting on him, saying he never does what she's telling him to do. Angus stayed quiet, and the moment they got home, he went straight into the workshop. He had absolutely no idea that this strange egg he found by the ocean was about to change his life forever. Soon after, his sister Christy got back home and asked Annie what Angus had done at the beach that day. Annie told her that, just like always, he sat around by himself and did nothing. Meanwhile, Angus was putting his things away in the workshop. The workshop had actually belonged to his father, Charlie. As soon as Angus stepped into the workshop, old memories of his dad started coming back to him. Charlie was currently serving in the military, fighting a war for his country. Thinking about his dad, Angus picked up his photo and stared at it. The hope of seeing his father come back home was written all over his face. Then he looked over at the calendar to see when Charlie would be coming back home. After that, he took out the egg he found in the ocean, washed it off, and peeled away the outer layer. He was surprised to see a bright glowing blue color underneath. Just before he could keep looking at it, Annie called out for him, forcing him to leave the egg behind and run back toward the house. Seeing the strange glow coming from that mysterious egg filled Angus with all kinds of questions. That night, heavy rain suddenly started pouring down. Angus got worried that maybe the egg wasn't safe in the workshop. He immediately ran through the rain and rushed inside, but the egg had already cracked open. He looked around to see what had come out of it and spotted a strange-looking creature. The sight completely froze Angus in place for a few seconds. He moved closer and tried touching it, but the creature snapped at him and tried to bite him. Angus quickly realized that it was probably hungry. He rushed off to grab something for it to eat, and after that, the creature started calming down. Angus was gently feeding it when Annie started calling for him again. The poor guy had no choice but to head back and go to bed. Then the next morning, Angus woke up and saw a group of soldiers had arrived at their house. The new day had already brought another unexpected turn right to their doorstep. Angus went with Annie and Christy to meet them, where they were introduced to Captain Hamilton. Hamilton explained that according to reports, enemy forces might try to enter the country by sea, so his team would be staying at their house while preparing for a possible attack. The mood around the house suddenly turned serious because things were no longer as normal as they used to be. After that, the soldiers started carrying equipment inside and setting up their work area. Annie then told Christy and Angus to go back to their room. Later on, Angus headed to the library so he could find a book about this strange little creature. As soon as he found one, he rushed straight back to the workshop. Angus couldn't stop getting more curious about finding out what that strange creature really was. But when he got there, the whole place was a complete mess, and the creature was trying to chew on Charlie's boots. Angus realized it was hungry again, so he headed into the kitchen to grab some food. But Sergeant Stronk, the soldier's cook, stopped him and told him he wasn't allowed in there. Angus told him he just needed a little food, but Stronk ignored him. Then Angus asked if he could at least take out the kitchen trash. Hearing that, Stronk immediately agreed. Now, Angus had come up with a new way to help the little creature. Then Angus fed his new friend all the leftover food from the kitchen. Watching him eat made Angus incredibly happy, and he decided to name the creature Crusoe. After that, he started reading about the animal, but he couldn't find any useful information about it. Angus was starting to feel a completely different kind of connection with the mysterious creature. Before long, Crusoe had finished every last bit of food, so Angus filled up the trash can with water so Crusoe could swim around and enjoy himself. Meanwhile, Hamilton was getting his men ready for a possible enemy attack. He wanted them prepared to respond at any moment. On the other side, Angus left Crusoe alone in the workshop and headed back so Annie wouldn't start getting suspicious. While Angus was hiding his new friend, the situation around them was becoming even more serious. Later, we see a man named Lewis arrive in town. He went to meet Annie, who was in the workshop at the time. He told her that he wanted to work there. After hearing him ask for a job, Annie told him he'd need to clean up the entire workshop, and Lewis got right to work. While cleaning, he also rolled out the trash can Angus had hidden Crusoe inside. The moment Angus saw that, he immediately ran over to stop Lewis, but Crusoe wasn't there anymore. Angus quickly asked Lewis who he was and what he was doing in the workshop. The worry on Angus's face was obvious now, because Crusoe had suddenly disappeared. Angus told him that this was his father's workshop and that he would be coming back from the war soon. Lewis replied, "Look kid, your dad can do whatever he wants when he gets back, but until then, I'm the one running this place." Hearing that, Angus walked outside and started searching for Crusoe. At that point, all he could think about was finding his little friend. We then see that Crusoe had wandered into Angus's house, and the moment Stronk's dog Churchill spotted him, it started chasing after him. Luckily, Churchill was chained up, so he wasn't able to jump on Crusoe or hurt him. Crusoe ran straight into the bathroom. At that same moment, Christy walked into the bathroom too, and she immediately screamed before running out toward the stairs. Suddenly, the whole house dropped into complete chaos. As soon as Angus heard her screaming, he instantly realized Christy had seen Crusoe. He calmed her down and explained that Crusoe was his pet and had hatched from an egg he found by the ocean. Christy was still completely terrified. For Christy, trusting that strange creature still wasn't easy at all. But Angus made her promise not to tell Annie because Crusoe would never hurt anyone. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Annie went to meet Lewis in the workshop. She had brought some of her husband's clothes and handed them to him. Angus was doing everything he could to keep Crusoe a secret from everyone else in the house. Seeing the clothes, Lewis asked if Charlie wasn't coming back. Annie quietly said, with a heavy heart, that he would never return. Lewis looked confused and said Angus had told him his father was coming home from the war. Annie replied that Angus was still just a kid. The truth was that Charlie had died after his ship sank in the ocean. After that, Annie asked Lewis if he could help fix the leak in the bathroom. It was a painful truth Annie had been carrying in her heart for a long time. Lewis came inside the house to fix it, and we see that this was the same bathroom where Angus and Christie had hidden Crusoe. As soon as Lewis knocked on the door, they tried stopping him from coming in. But after they still hadn't come out for a long time, Lewis warned them that he'd tell Annie. Finally, Christie had no choice but to open the door. Lewis walked in and said he was there to fix the leak, and then suddenly his eyes landed on Crusoe. He completely freaked out and nervously asked what it was. Angus then told him the entire story about Crusoe. Lewis stared at him in shock and slowly reached out to touch him. Now, Lewis had also stepped into the mystery that was beginning to change everything. Then suddenly, Crusoe tried to bite him. Anyway, Lewis said that Crusoe looked exactly like a seahorse. Seahorses were considered some of the rarest creatures in the world. According to legend, only one seahorse exists on Earth at any given time. Hearing all of this about Crusoe made everyone even more curious about discovering what he really was. After one seahorse dies, a new egg eventually hatches and another one is born. Lewis then started telling them about the magical powers seahorses were said to have, but suddenly Annie knocked on the door. Angus quickly asked Lewis to help hide Crusoe because Annie would never allow him to keep something like that in the house. Lewis agreed to help him. Things had reached a point where one small mistake could expose a huge secret. When Annie walked inside, she didn't see Crusoe. Even though Crusoe was peeking out from his hiding spot, Lewis somehow managed to play it off. Later, Annie walked outside and ran into Hamilton. He invited her to join the soldiers for dinner that night. Later that evening, Lewis told Angus they should take Crusoe back to the ocean because that was where he truly belonged. But Angus wasn't willing to accept that at all. To Angus, Crusoe had become much more than just a creature. He had become his closest friend. Angus said that Crusoe's real place was with him and nowhere else. Soon, dinner with the soldiers got underway at the house. During that time, Angus had to leave Crusoe in the bathroom while he went to take care of something, but he accidentally forgot to shut the door. Sometimes, even a small mistake can lead to a big problem. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Crusoe slipped out once again. Meanwhile, Strunk's dog Churchill caught Crusoe's scent and immediately started searching for him like crazy. The moment Churchill spotted him, he began chasing Crusoe all over the house. During the chase, they jumped onto the dinner table and completely ruined the meal. Everyone else had only seen Churchill running around. Poor Churchill was definitely going to catch it after this. The entire house suddenly exploded into noise and complete chaos. Meanwhile, Crusoe ran outside and jumped straight into the fountain, where he found plenty of fish to eat. At the same time, Angus was searching everywhere for him. Then Lewis told Angus to head back home because Annie was already upset over what had happened at the dinner table. Lewis promised him that he would find Crusoe and bring him back safely. Angus headed home, and after searching for a while, Lewis finally found Crusoe near the fountain. At least one thing was certain now. Crusoe had been found safe and unharmed, but now Crusoe had grown much bigger than before. Lewis immediately went and brought Angus over, and the moment Angus saw him, he realized that it was finally time to take Crusoe back to the ocean. Just by looking at Crusoe, it was obvious that his journey had reached a completely new stage. They loaded Crusoe into the back of a truck and headed toward the ocean. Before long, they reached the shoreline and finally released Crusoe back into the water. Angus felt heartbroken having to say goodbye, but he knew he didn't have any other choice, so he made the difficult decision to let Crusoe go. Sometimes friendship means knowing you can't keep someone with you, even if you want to. The next day, we meet a man named Jimmy, who had gone out fishing with his friend Hugh. Suddenly, Hugh felt like something huge had gotten caught on their line, but as soon as they started pulling it in, their boat began getting dragged through the water. Then suddenly, a massive Crusoe appeared right in front of them. The sight completely stunned both of them, but Hugh still wanted to capture the creature because he believed they could make a fortune from it. Jimmy didn't agree, and meanwhile, Crusoe kept dragging them farther and farther away from shore. Finally, Jimmy cut the line and saved their lives, and then they saw Crusoe once again. Now Crusoe was becoming more than just a mystery. He was starting to draw attention from everyone around him. They couldn't believe their eyes because they had never seen anything like this creature before, and they had never even heard of anything like it. Meanwhile, Hamilton told Angus that his mother wanted him to start training now so he could eventually join the military. Even after something this huge had happened, nobody had any idea what was coming next. After that, Angus started helping the soldiers with their work, but within a few days, he got bored with all of it. One day, he slipped away from Captain Hamilton and ran toward the ocean. He kept calling out for Crusoe, but there was no sign of him anywhere, so Angus climbed into a boat and headed out to search for him himself. Deep down, Angus still held on to the hope of seeing his friend again. A little while later, Crusoe rose out of the water right in front of him, and Angus was shocked by how enormous he had become. Then, Angus jumped onto the back of his special friend. Even though he was extremely nervous, Crusoe took him out across the ocean, and Angus loved every second of it. When Crusoe brought Angus back to shore, Strunk's dog Churchill happened to be there too, and he picked up Crusoe's scent again. Strunk was with Churchill, so when the dog suddenly took off running toward the shoreline, Strunk followed right behind him. Things were about to get complicated again, because a secret like this couldn't stay hidden forever. He had never seen such a huge and strange creature like Crusoe before. No matter how hard he tried, he could barely believe what he had seen with his own eyes. Later that night, Angus told Christy and Lewis all about his trip out on the ocean, and hearing the story made both of them really happy. For Angus, every moment connected to Crusoe was starting to become a special memory. Outside, Annie saw them laughing together and started walking away, but Lewis noticed her and followed after her. Annie thanked him because, thanks to him, she had finally seen her children laughing freely again after such a long time. Lewis just smiled and brushed it off. For the first time in a long while, happiness finally seemed to be returning to that house. Meanwhile, we see Jimmy telling a reporter named Jock about the strange creature they had seen out in the ocean. After hearing about it, Jock thought he could use the story to bring investors into town because tourists would probably be interested in seeing such a rare creature. But Hugh said the town was perfectly fine the way it already was. Jock disagreed and said that if there was some dangerous creature in the ocean, people had the right to know about it. The next day, Hamilton took Annie and her kids to the top of a hill. Crusoe's secret was slowly starting to spread to more and more people. Hamilton had brought them there so he could show them the military's preparations. He wanted to demonstrate some of the weapons that would be used against enemy forces. Captain Hamilton then ordered his men to put on the demonstration attack against enemies hidden in the water. Suddenly, Angus felt like something very bad was about to happen. The moment Angus heard that, he realized Crusoe could be in danger. He desperately begged Annie to stop the soldiers, but Annie couldn't understand what he was talking about and told him to stand quietly. Christy stepped in and told Annie that Angus was telling the truth, but Annie didn't listen to her either. Meanwhile, the soldiers began launching their attack into the water, and at the same time, Crusoe became terrified. He struggled desperately to avoid the deadly assault around him. Things in the ocean were becoming far more dangerous than before. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Jock had gone to the shoreline that day, hoping to get a picture of Crusoe, but they couldn't catch even a glimpse of him. So they made a fake model of Crusoe, took pictures of it, and had them printed in the newspaper the next day. A few days later, when Strunk read the newspaper, he suddenly remembered that it was the same terrifying creature he had seen near the shore. Now, the search for Crusoe had become much bigger than a simple rumor. It had turned into major news. Strunk and some of the other soldiers then decided they were going to track Crusoe down. That night, Christy went into Angus's room, and then the three of them, Angus, Christy, and Lewis, snuck out of the house so they could make sure Crusoe was okay. Only one thought was running through all of their minds. Crusoe had to be safe. As soon as they reached the shoreline, Angus called out for Crusoe. At first, he didn't come out, but when he finally appeared, he seemed wild and completely out of control. He didn't even recognize Angus anymore and actually tried to attack him. Angus and Lewis stared in shock because they couldn't understand what was happening. Soon after that, Crusoe disappeared back into the water, and Angus blamed Lewis for everything because it was Lewis's idea to release him back into the ocean. The friend Angus trusted the most now seemed like he was changing right in front of him. Meanwhile, Strunk and the soldiers were out searching for Crusoe in their boat. This time, they had come with the intention of killing him. As they got closer to shore, they heard Churchill barking. Strunk immediately realized Churchill had probably spotted something, so he ordered the boat to move toward the sound. But suddenly, Crusoe swallowed Churchill whole, and once again, everything went silent. Things had completely changed now, and the danger had become far greater than before. The soldiers had no idea what was happening, and they immediately started firing in that direction. Then suddenly, Crusoe slammed into their boat and knocked everyone into the water. Suddenly, the entire ocean was filled with fear and chaos. Meanwhile, when Hamilton got word about the gunfire out at sea, he assumed enemy forces had launched an attack on them. He immediately ordered all of his soldiers to return fire. Then he told Annie to stay inside the house with the kids and keep them safe. But Annie noticed Christy and asked where Angus was. Christy told her he wasn't home. Hearing that instantly sent Annie into a panic, and she said there was no way she was leaving Angus alone in the middle of something like this. A mother's fear for her child was growing stronger with every passing moment. Because of that, Annie insisted on going with Hamilton toward the ocean. Hamilton tried several times to talk her out of it, but Annie refused to back down, leaving him with no choice but to take her along. Out on the water, Crusoe had completely lost control and had Strunk clamped inside his mouth. Just then, Angus showed up at the last possible moment and tried to stop him. Now, everyone's hopes were resting on the bond between Angus and his friend, but Crusoe didn't listen to him at all. Angus stepped into the water and moved closer to him, but suddenly he lost his footing and started drowning. The moment Crusoe saw that happen, he immediately let go of Strunk and rushed over to save Angus. At that moment, it became clear that Angus held a special place in Crusoe's heart. Crusoe quickly carried Angus back to shore, but Angus had already passed out. Lewis and Crusoe desperately tried waking him up, but there was no movement at all. Still, they didn't give up, and eventually Angus finally regained consciousness. Seeing Crusoe back to normal again made Angus incredibly happy. Relief was written all over everyone's faces, because the biggest danger had finally passed. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton received word that there was still no sign of any enemy boats, but he still ordered the the soldiers to continue attacking the water. Before long, he arrived at the shoreline too, but at that same moment, Crusoe disappeared back underwater. Annie ran over to Angus and was overwhelmed with relief seeing that he was okay. Angus tried explaining everything about Crusoe to her, but Annie got upset and told him to stop living in his imaginary world. But right then, Crusoe suddenly rose out of the water, and Annie finally realized that everything Angus had been saying was true. Even Hamilton stood there stunned after seeing such a massive creature. But then suddenly, following Hamilton's earlier orders, the soldiers started attacking the water again. Angus immediately climbed onto Crusoe's back so he could guide him away from the soldiers. Angus was now ready to go to any length of the waters again. Seeing that terrified Annie, Hamilton tried contacting his soldiers, but the radios had stopped working. So Hamilton, Lewis, and Annie climbed into a boat and went after Angus themselves. Meanwhile, with Angus helping him, Crusoe kept avoiding the soldiers' attacks. Out in the middle of the ocean, every moment was becoming more dangerous than the last. But just as they were about to get out of reach, the soldiers activated a giant net in the water that had originally been set up for enemy forces. Unfortunately, Crusoe couldn't clear it in time. Hamilton's boat finally reached Crusoe, and Lewis shouted for Angus to jump aboard. Before leaving Crusoe, Angus told him that he was his best friend and that he would never forget him. Then he jumped into the water and climbed back onto the boat. Meanwhile, Crusoe dove beneath the water and then launched himself into the air with an incredible leap, soaring right over the net. Seeing that, Angus and everyone else exploded with excitement because Crusoe was finally safe and out of reach of the soldiers. And if you don't want to miss more incredible stories like this, hit subscribe on Rafsat right now, because the next story might completely change the way you think.